Good evening and welcome to Dynamics Update. Today it's an episode about new features in version 10.0.31. So Gustav, how are you doing today?
I'm great, Johan. Thanks for asking. So it's a normal episode, right?
It's one of those normal
episodes where we just go through all the cool stuff that has been released since last time, right?
Exactly. Not someone that we need to talk to. That's okay. All right. So
you can start.
Yeah, I can start. Why? Yes. I've been working for a while now with some discussions about template rollouts. So what we're basically doing is that we're figuring out the process for building a template so that we can easily copy legal entities. We can build new legal entities from a master. And something to complement that is actually a feature coming in 10.0.31, which is called cross-company data sharing. And so this has been available before, but as I understand it, it hasn't been available full scale in F&O before. So this is something that they are building out to be able to share tables between legal entities. So today we have either global tables, which is one thing, and then we have shared tables, which is partitioned to be legal entity based. So we have one line for each legal entity for everything that is in the table. This is something in between. So this is basically a shared table, but it functions from a technical perspective as a global table. Yeah. So we basically have one line for each legal entity, but the legal entities are expecting it to be multiple lines. So they see it as their own line, but it's basically just a master line that has to do with all of the companies.
Yeah, I haven't seen this in play yet, but I suspect it's the similar, or at least the same as the old virtual company, where you have a different data area identifier for the virtual table. So you would have like two companies of 001 and 002. The customer record would have like VFR for virtual record or something like that.
Yep.
I would guess.
Yep. And what I'm curious, I haven't really, because I don't work that much with this, but what I would like to understand here is if it's possible, for instance, to have multiple master data companies. So we can have one for a production company and one for a sales company, for instance.
Yeah, I haven't had a chance to look at it either because it's so new. But I suspect, because there was some benefits, there was also a ton of like horrible scenarios using virtual companies. To say not the least would be like integration and master data. Give me all values in the customer from customer table, but not for this specific data area. So a lot of hard coding was used back in the day for this. But if it is following that, then it's, you're basically creating a virtual company, a name, like VC company, and then you attach legal entities to that one. So that would support but then you would have to differentiate between table collections, which was the previous name. Again, like read through the documentation here, but technically it's like a bunch of tables can be shared by one or more different companies, but you would have to check that it's possible to have separate virtual companies. But if I understand it correctly, yes, you add it to the policy basically. So you have all companies not in that particular policy still have their own like legal entity partition data, but you could have same set of tables to a different set of companies.
One limitation here, which is in place still, is that the sharing does not work together with dual write. So that's an important part, and that's understandable because Dataverse doesn't really have this concept.
No, exactly, and and change tracking is not supported for child company tables either. So, I mean, there are a number of scenarios that you need to check, but it makes sense in some scenarios. I would imagine, because for like data storage and data deduplication, of course. But it's pretty clear. I think maybe we could put in the show notes the link or look at the documentation, because I think it's pretty clearly documented. There's like a matrix when you should decide which scenario when you should decide on the other one with the replication component. So, but it's a nice feature when you need to use it, but be careful.
Yep. All right. So your next one.
Yeah, I have one for commerce. Surprise, surprise, my favorite area. But This is a nice one, which I know has been requested for quite a while. It's a very base feature, actually. It's creating purchase orders directly from pools. So, I mean, ideally, you have a replenishment scenario where you're coming from a distribution central, perhaps, but there are, in many ways, always the need to buy stuff from an external vendor directly to the store. And in line with the design principle, which has been the case for quite a while, I think, or at least it seems to be, where you can put as much back office functionality in the pools as possible. You can do the majority of your work from the POS application, from store commerce. So being able to buy something to a specific store from an external vendor is a base feature that should have been there for a while, but it's there now. So before this, you could receive a PO, but you could not create it in POS. You had to create it in backend or F&O, and then you could receive it in pools. Now you can create it in pools.
Yes. So another one, we talked a while ago about detours in the warehousing application, meaning that you could set up rules which meant that in some cases a warehouse worker would end up in a situation where they would need to respond to something that is not part of the original way of placing an order. For instance, if this inventory number is below a certain value, you should validate that we are running out of these and just confirm that we have a low count on them or something like that.
Yeah.
And what happens in this case is that in some cases you can actually have these detours be auto-submitted, which means that you can actually say that you need to go through these, and these. So for instance, if we look at the low count thing, it can actually push the user through the entire workflow of ordering or actually telling someone that we have a low inventory count and then just submitting the screen. So they don't even have to do anything. It just does it in the warehouse app instead.
That's very nice, and it enables a lot of scenarios. It was a lot of nice features coming from supply this time. I mean, sometimes it's less, but a lot of nice life-enhancing features. This is one of them, right? I mean, life-enhancing because you can get more information easier, and it doesn't necessarily make life harder for the warehouse worker, right? Or at least it's aimed not to be as least disruptive as possible. I have a number of these, so we can start with one of them. The location directives is another one, a favorite of mine, where a location directive is something where you can instruct, if you work, let's say you work at the receiving, right? You receive goods coming in, and then the mobile device tells you where to put it. So there are like a ton of strategies and philosophies here on how to optimize your warehouse. But without going into that, a location directive can help you instruct the warehouse worker where to put it. So let's say you work with dangerous goods, you want to store it in a safe area of the warehouse, then you can set up a location directive that instructs you that if item X has this particular tag, you should suggest to the worker to put it there. That's a simple way of using location directives. And when I remember when setting this up, it was nice, but it took a lot of testing because you had to like simulate it. What is new in this release is a testing functionality. So you can do acceptance testing, like given, when, then tests to verify that they behave as expected, basically. Some limitations exist, but it's a life-enhancing feature to make life easier for us, the poor users who have to work with the system. So I think that was nice, a nice improving feature.
Okay, so you're next.
If I jump out of the supply for a minute, I had one finding on Dataverse, or you were right, one of your favorite subjects, Johan. The feature here is row version change tracking for finance and operations in Dataverse, so virtual tables, where basically this leverages off Dataverse to trigger change tracking and then, of course, additional integration scenarios from there. So Dataverse is your stepping stone, and then you can enable change tracking in Dataverse and trigger additional integration patterns. That's really cool. It's for data archival, Synapse integration, a lot of like prerequisites here that you can use for different patterns. But one of the comments, or the exact quote here is The goal over time is to unify all existing finance and operations data synchronization frameworks into one that is based on Dataverse synchronization services. And this is, I'm not going to say it's hidden, it's there in clear text, but it's in one of the more technical features. It's a clear strategy decision here that moving towards Dataverse for data synchronization framework is there. We should have known, or we should know it based off the convergence discussions and all of that ongoing Dataverse topics. But it's never been more clear that you need to understand the technology here, and you need to understand the difference and what problem it's trying to solve, right? So if you only want to have change tracking, look into that. But again, look into Dataverse as much as you can on leveraging it for data movement. That would be my take.
Yes, and if that was a big change, I have one that is probably a really, really small change, but an important one at that. Because one of the main culprits of bad performance in AX and F&O, and one that Microsoft has actually acknowledged and told us for a really, 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 really long time, don't use it, is database logging. So if we need it, and if we absolutely must have it, then it's there. So what it basically does is that it tracks tables in AX or F&O and tells us in a log exactly what was changed, when it was changed, and by whom it was changed. So in some cases, for compliance reasons, we do need this. Yeah. We need to have a way to be able to track every single change to a table. In most cases, we don't. And unfortunately, there are a lot of over-ambitious people who think that we need tracking for everything.
Never.
So what we can actually do now is that there is a new metadata tag on the table telling us that this table can be set up to not be able to set up database logging for it. Yeah. So we can actually disable database logging. We do that from Visual Studio by setting a metadata tag on the table. And the metadata tag is set to no by default. If we set it to yes, then it will not be available to be set to database logging. I was just wondering why it wasn't the other way around. Why weren't all of the database tables set to yes by default, and then we would have to enable it for those that we absolutely needed it for?
Yeah, I'm going to guess that this is like a ticket-driven decision. So if they do that, they will get a lot of tickets from customers complaining that their logging is no longer working. But I share your opinion. I mean, in all essence, you should not have to rely on database logging if you can. There are different ways of doing it, of course, and it's a performance thief or culprit. But again, there are scenarios where it's valid. Another question would be, will there be which standard tables will get this by default from Microsoft, if any? I mean, of course, transactions makes sense to not allow from a performance perspective, but is there a list of tables, or is it like everything is set to no and it's up to you to decide it? Or will there be a set of tables, standard tables, where this is set to yes by default, and then you would have to override it?
There is actually another metadata change, which I also saw, and that has to do with security roles. So you can actually set the metadata on a security role, which says can be deleted from UI.
Yeah, I saw that one.
And there we actually have the opposite. So
exactly.
It is actually set to default as yes. And then you can actually, if you have roles, customized roles that you're building, which is extremely important for your process, and you absolutely don't want anyone to delete it, you can actually mark it as a system role, and it won't be able to be deleted from the UI. So you will get an error message. This is a system role. You can't delete it.
And it's also, I mean, the development part here is interesting to speculate about them. Where is this coming from? Is it coming from a lot of people having like issues where someone accidentally deletes the role? Or is it coming from like it kind of makes sense for us to have, like, we have this segregated, right? Roles are developed here, tested here, and then deployed. You should not allow someone to delete them. It's it makes a lot of sense, of course, to have it, but maybe it should be like you can't. When would you want to delete a security role from like a production environment?
I have a guess. I have a guess in that sometimes the customers really don't do all of the research needed to set up the security model for their system. So basically, users might have more security permissions than they should.
Oh, of course, that makes sense.
And this is sort of like a last line of defense for important security roles.
But then you could just remove the role from the user. But I think I understand what you mean. I think it's something we can speculate about. It's there as a nice. Maybe it's just that we have to have this option to kind of delete the role and not make it not allow anyone to have it. Then you can do that unless you have this flag. But it seems to be more of like, don't accidentally delete my role, please.
And I also think that it might have to do with the fact that because we've been discussing how to handle system-wide roles, Microsoft, the built-in roles.
Yeah.
And I mean, one philosophy is to use them because that makes for less of maintenance.
Yeah.
But the problem is that if Microsoft changes them, then you will also get the change and you don't really know exactly what the change is. True. So this makes it possible for a customer to build a complete set of new system rules and mark them as system rules and have them be handled in the same way as the rest of the system rules.
Yeah, true. So yeah, it makes sense. I mean, it fits. It gives you an option at least. It's an option that you can choose to use. So I'm all for that flexibility and enabling or disabling. That's good. It gives us options. Yeah. So I again back to supply. I saw a number of good things. One nice thing which we don't talk about that much here, the BI enhancements, like the dashboards. One new dashboard coming in this release is the supply risks to prevent supply chain disruptions, and clearly it's in line with the time right now with all of the supply chain disruptions we've been seeing and like shortages, etc. So what it is, it's a dashboard based of data. It's called supply risk assessments. It's material managers to better assess supply risks and understand the impact of potential sourcing disruptions. That's a quote. But it's a BI dashboard that gives you delivery tracking, on-time confirmation. It gives you KPIs for like purchase order lines, quantities and percentages of to be able to forecast and see, do I have a potential risk here? And I've seen this at a number of customers with custom delivery tracking being the only way. At the very least, you should investigate if this is an option for you to kind of get what you need as a built-in dashboard. So have a look at the supply risk assessment dashboard.
Yes. So I don't have that many more. Do you have anything else?
Yeah, I could probably go all night here for all the supply chain, but if I have to choose one additional one, it would have to be a feature enhancement, again, coming for supply chain. And that's on the master planning, an area which has been like a nightmare area for many from a performance perspective. I know it's been through a lot of changes, so it's really cool now. But the feature is basically to be able to restart and resume logic for the forecast generation batch process. And this is just a classic, if it breaks down, it's no fun to have to restart it because it might be a very long running process. So this feature just enables it to pick up the bundles, I would suspect. And it's interesting because the quote from Learn here is that it enables it to be restarted after an infrastructure failure occurs. Of course, for the on-prem, that makes sense. And it's just nice, refreshing to see that, okay, we know things might go down here. So let's try to build in some resume functionality for when it does. More of that. I think things happen in all environments, even though it's cloud, it's still stuff that can break. And of course, it might be driven from on-prem, but it's a nice feature that might save a lot of morning hours for people relying on the forecast generation to be done.
Yes. Okay, so this was a bit shorter episode than usual, but I think with that we say thank you for tonight, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye bye.